everyone, my name is Chelsea and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I am sharing with you my 2021 reading stats, as well as every single book I read in 2021. So it is that time of year again. Technically, January is when I do all of my end of the year stuff. So we're going to be starting with all of my reading stats, reading graphs, everything like that. I do end up using Goodreads throughout the year, as well as a spreadsheet that is based on Cawpile from G at Book Roast. I will leave everything linked down below that I can, but I have made some tweaks based on different things that I want to track as well, and I don't actually use the Cawpile system for ratings. Mostly I just took that spreadsheet and added things that I did want to track on there. So we're going to start with all of my stats because I do think that is very interesting. We have all the charts, and then after we're done with like all of the numbers, I'm going to jump into every single book that I did read in 2021. So the first thing that we're going to look at is actually the amount of books that I read in 2021. I did read a total of 250. That is including DNFs. If I was not including DNFs, I actually read a total of 241. And here's the chart of books read per month. My best month was in September with a total of 46 books. This was one of the months where they did the 30 and 30 manga challenge that I did participate in, so I think at least 30 of these books here were manga. And then the month with the least amount of books read is going to be November with a total of 10. I did end up in a reading slump around the end of the year, October, November, December, but I was still reading some manga, comics, graphic novels, that kind of thing, so it wasn't like really low numbers. And as you can see here, December actually looks amazing. If I didn't read any manga in December, I think I only would have read like 3 to 5 things total. And then we also have a chart for a number of pages read. In the whole year, I actually did read 61,477 pages, but the breakdown here is going to be pretty much the same as the books read chart, with the highest amount of pages being read in September and the lowest amount being read in November. With that 61-some thousand pages read in the year, I did actually average that out, and the amount of pages I would have read a day if I was reading every single day of the year was about 168 pages a day. I think it was actually like 168.4, so I just rounded down. Moving into the format of the books, obviously, as you can see here, I read the most physical books this year. Again, a lot of this is because I read manga, and I don't read very much ebooks of manga. I think the most I have is usually in physical form, and so I actually ended up reading 166 physical books, which accounted for 66.4, or almost 2/3 of what I read this year. I did also read 11 audiobooks, 36 ebooks, and 37 ARCs. And then, like I was saying before, I read a lot of manga, so moving into my genres, I did read a total of 14 different genres. Some of these genres did end up being broken down a little bit extra into more of like subcategories, and then you guys will see that as I talk through this, but I did want to break that up that way for myself. Like if I know something was more dystopian specific compared to maybe just like sci-fi, I did break it up that way. And as no surprise, my biggest genre was manga. I read a total of 103 different volumes of manga in the year of 2021, which accounts for over 40% of what I read. My next biggest genre were comics and graphic novels with 14%. Then I read 13.2% fantasy, 7.6% romance, 5.6% contemporary, 4.4% each of sci-fi, horror, and paranormal, 2% thrillers, 1.2% mystery, 0.8% dystopians, because again, I only read like 2 of them this year, so the percentages are getting very small now. And then I had 3 genres where I only read 1 book per genre, and those genres were crime, historical fiction, and retellings. And again, like I said, those are sort of specific, but I did feel like those were the categories they fit the best. And because I only read 1 book per genre, each of those genres only accounts for 0.4% of everything that I read. Moving into length, I'm not going to get into like every single book that I read with certain specific lengths, but the most common length that I read was between 100 and 200 pages. Because of all the manga I was reading, that is the most common like page range for those. and I read about 38% of books in that category, or 95 books. My second most common page range was 200 to 300. Again, I do have some manga that fit into that page range as well, and I have been noticing I've been slowly reading a little bit more like novella length books, so books that are under 300 pages, and so those account for that as well. And then according to Goodreads, because I wasn't going to do the calculations all by myself, the average number of pages read per book, so if I averaged everything based on the exact page number of the books, was about 254 pages. Going into age range, this one again, I feel like the manga definitely skews it a bit because my most common age range is young adult. Over half of the books that I ended up reading in 2021, I did classify as young adult. However, if I took the manga out, I do think I read more adult novels, adult fiction, than I have been reading young adult lately, but I did include everything, so young adult is my most common. However, of the books I did read, I also did have over 1/3 adult books, and then I had 19 middle grades and 9 new adults. So those are obviously the more rare ones for me, the ones I don't reach for as much, even though I do like those age groupings as well. And then we're gonna also be pretty quick with the publication year. I do track all of the publication years that I read. However, my biggest stat that I'm curious about is how many are newly published that year. So we're published in 2021 versus previous years. And so I did end up reading 77 new releases in 2021, which accounts for 30.8% of the books I read, so just under 1/3. Moving into star ratings, I think I had a pretty good reading year this year. Goodreads says my average rating was 4.3 stars, which is pretty accurate because I did have some DNFs. Sometimes I rate those really low if there are specific reasons, like maybe racism in the book or something like that, where I'm like, I do not think this was a good book, versus I just don't think this book was for me. So some of those DNFs are low rated, some of them are not rated at all, and I don't think that actually changes my rating, but overall I had a very good reading year. So we're gonna break down these star ratings. Like I said, I actually did have 9 DNFs on my chart. Those are 1 stars, just because I don't actually think they show up the right way for me. I think, try to write DNF in there at least at one point in time, and it didn't quite look right. So I do have those as 1 stars on my charts, but they're not always rated on Goodreads. I had 4 2 stars, 5 2.5 stars, 25 3 stars, 22 3.5 stars, 65 4 stars, 15 4.5 stars, and 104 5-star reads, which is about 41.8%. So a very high proportion of 5 stars. But again, I was reading a lot of manga and things like that, which I know what I like in those genres, and so I usually have a higher propensity to read 5-star manga than I do sometimes with like the normal novels. But again, I had a really, really good reading year in 2021. Then one thing that I was tracking this year is how I got the book, or like where I ended up reading it from. So the highest number is obviously going to be books that I own. Some of these were books that I owned previously to 2021. Some of them are books that I bought while in 2021. I did not separate out the number this year. However, I feel like that might be something I want to do to see how many I'm actually reading that are more like backlist titles versus books that I purchased in that year. But I did not think about that earlier. So I read a total of 186 books that I owned, or almost 3/4 of the books that I read this year. 51 of them were borrowed. That could be either ARCs or through the library, because I did listen to some audiobooks through my library apps. I also had some ebooks that I read that way as well. And then 13 of the books that I read were gifted from other people. I did decide to start tracking my rereads this year. I did not do it last year, but it is something that I was curious about because I think I might have done it last year, because one of the things that I had talked about previously was that I didn't reread very much, and I wanted to do that a little bit more, and so my number has gone up. I don't remember what it was last year, but I did reread 29 books this year, which does not seem like a lot when I read like 250, but it is way more than I did the year before. Then this stat is no surprise to me. We are talking about the books that I read that were standalones versus series. I read about 75% series. This I feel like I do normally do. I really do prefer books that are more than just a standalone, although I do have some favorites that are standalones as well. And with this number, I did actually check and I finished 9 whole series in 2021, either all the way through the series or just the last book that I had never finished yet. This is not a very high number. I'm in the middle of too many series, but I was still happy that I did finish them because I feel like most years I don't finish very many. And then a new stat again for this year is tracking how the books were published. So if they were indie books or traditionally published. And while I am sort of happy with the amount of indie books I read, I do actually want the number to be higher next year, but it is something that I had not been tracking before, and then I wanted to track this year. So I read 45 indie published or self-published books this year, which only accounts for 18%. I would like that number to be higher. Then moving into the representation in the books for LGBTQIA+ representation, only 27.6% of the books I read had definite LGBTQIA+ representation. Now this is something that it could be slightly personal on how you judge this. I counted it as having that representation if we had something blatantly stated on page. It didn't have to blatantly say I am bisexual, but I would need a character to say I like boys and girls, you know, something like that. It didn't have to be the like, here is my identity, but I needed something more than just like, I feel like this character could be bi. Like, I wanted something more concrete, books that were actually showing me that this is the identity of the characters. So while I do feel like some of the books that I read could have been interpreted a certain way, if it wasn't blatantly on page, I did not count it. I would like the number of these books to be higher as well, because I only read, like I said, like 27%, so it is over a quarter of the books that I read, but it is something I would like to be higher. And then with that stat, I also was tracking the specific identities. So the most common identity that I saw in the books that I read was gay or male-male romance. 34.8% were gay. 24.6% had multiple identities. I classified this as a book that actually had specifically at least 2 identities in there. It wasn't like 2 characters that were both sapphic or 2 characters that were both gay or anything like that. They had to have 2 separate identities in the book at least. 21.7% were sapphic, 10.1% were bi, 4.3% were trans, and 4.3% were normalized queerness. I think I only had like 3 books specifically that I classified as normalized queerness, and I think those were all sci-fis, maybe fantasies, but for that one specifically, those are all 4 worlds that have multiple identities, but also the biggest classification for normalized queerness is that in the book, in the world, everything is just like, this is what it is. So I think one of them had a sci-fi setting where there was an alien species where the entire alien species was basically gender fluid / non-binary. They could choose what they identified as. It was constantly changing. There was no set binary in this world, and this was something that was normal for this culture. Like, this is just who they were, that kind of stuff. So things that when you're in the story, there's never a question that these identities are not the norm. Okay, and then moving into author stats. So I do track some things with author. One of the most common ones that I think people track is the gender of the author writing the book. And for me, my highest gender of author that I read is female. So I did read 85 books, or 62% by female authors. I read 42 books, or 30.7% male authors. I read 7 books, or 5.1% non-binary authors. And I did have 2 authors that were not specified. I could not find information anywhere, which is perfectly fine, as well as 1 book that was written by multiple authors with multiple different gender identities. I will also say that I do track, based on what the authors that I can find, what their preferred pronouns are. If they are trans and they identify as a woman, they are counted in the woman category. If they are trans and they do identify as a man, they are counted in the male category. If they are non-binary and they use she, her pronouns, but it does say that they are non-binary, I count them in the non-binary category. I do my best with this based on social media. A lot of authors have like a Twitter or something like that. I could be mistaken on some of them, but this is, to the best of my abilities, the different genders that I do end up reading the most of. And then going into the same sort of vein, we have authors that are also people of color. So again, I try to track it as best I can if I can find information about the author online. So the number of this is better this year than it was last year. One of my, I think my goals for 2021 was trying to read closer to half white, half people of color authors, and I did get very close to that this year. 45.7% of the authors that I read were people of color. And I think I should mention, because I feel like I forgot to, when I go into author stats, I only count an author once. So even if I read a whole series by an author, they're only counted in the author information once. So like I was saying, I did have 45.7% people of color authors. The other basically half were white authors, although I did also have 3 authors that I could not find a picture or something like that anywhere online. I could not tell anywhere exactly if they were white or not, so I just put them as unknown, which again is perfectly fine. And then I did also track ethnicities of authors, nationalities of authors, and I think it should be no surprise that my highest was East Asian. In this category, obviously I have a lot of Japanese authors because I read a lot of manga, but I did also have Chinese authors in here as well. And then my next highest was Black authors. And then finally, the other author stat that I track is if an author is new to me or if it is something I have read before. And the new to me authors seem to constantly be winning this. I have been reading a lot of books by new to me authors, and this year, almost 3/4 of the books that I read were new authors to me. So about 73.7%, which means about 26.3% were authors I have read from before. Okay, and so those are all the stats. We are now going to go into every single book that I read in 2021. I think I'm going to do this by author's last name just because that way I can keep all the series that I read together, even if I didn't read them in the exact same month. Love Code by Anne Aguirre. Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. And Yet You Are So Sweet Volume 1 by Kujira Anand. Waiting for Spring Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, Volume 4, Volume 5, Volume 6, Volume 7, Volume 8, Volume 9, Volume 10, Volume 11, Volume 12, Volume 13, and Volume 14 by Anna Shin. Victories Greater Than Death by Charlie Jane Anders. Where Dreams Descend by Janella Angelis. A School Frozen in Time Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, and Volume 4, Art by Naoshi Arakawa, Story by Mizuki Sujimura. Perfect World Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3 by Rie Aruga. The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. Starfleet Academy, The Delta Anomaly by Rick Barba. Quincredible Volume 1 by Rodney Barnes. The Last True Vampire by Kate Baxter. Written in the Stars by Alexandria Bellafleur. Remember Me by Chelsea Bobulski. Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boully. The Devil Makes 3 by Tori Bovolino. Our Bloody Pearl by D.N. Bryn. Nomen Omen Volume 1, Total Eclipse of the Heart by Marco B. Bucci. Rogue Planet by Cullen Bunn. Stillhouse Lake by Rachel Kane. Style by Chelsea M. Cameron. The School for Good and Evil by Soman Chinani. Blackwater Sister by Zen Cho. Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicle Volume 1 and XXX Holic Volume 1 by Clamp. Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare. Artemis Fowl and The Arctic Incident by Owen Colfer. Thornwood by Leah Cypess. 40 Love and All the Feels by Olivia Dade. House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. Dragon Age Deception and Blue Wraith by Nunzio De Filippis. Well Played and Well Matched by Jen DeLuca. Monstrosity by Laura Diaz de Arce. Ice Planet Barbarians, Barbarian Alien, and Barbarian Lover by Ruby Dixon. Rhea and the Blood of the Nectar by Payal Doshi. After Me, The Great Flood, and Come Forth in Thaw by Jason Robert Ducharme. Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. Long Lost, Book 1, and Book 2 by Matthew Ehrman and Lisa Sturl. Trickery, Seduction, and Persuasion by Jamin Eve and Jane Washington. Eat, Pray, Die, and The Hunger Pains by Chelsea Field. The Wickeds by Gail Forman. Silver, Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, and Volume 4 by Stefan Franck. Legacy by Michael Jan Friedman. Anonymous Noise, Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3 by Ryoko Fukuyama. I Hear the Sunspot, Theory of Happiness. Limit Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3 by Yuki Fumino. My Summer of Youth Volume 1 by Nagasa Furuya. Boys Run the Riot Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3 by Keito Gaku. Love in an Undead Age by A.M. Jeever. Once and Future Volume 1, The King is Undead. And Volume 2, Old English by Kieran Gillen. These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. The Old Bay King by Donnie Goodman. Along for the Ride by Mimi Grace. Less by Andrew Sean Greer. The Weird of Holly Innsmouth by John Michael Greer. Kingpin by W.S. Greer. The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin. Devil's Line Volume 1 by Ryo Hanada. Horimiya Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, Volume 4, Volume 5, Volume 6, Volume 7, Volume 8, and Volume 9 by Hiro and Daisuke Hagiwara. Killing Time by Della Van Heis. The Library of the Dead by T.L. Huchu. Prince Freya Volume 4 by Keiko Ishihara. Deserter, Love Sickness, Remina, and Censor by Junji Ito. Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. Tokyo Ever After by Emiko Jean. Star-Crossed Volume 1 and Volume 2 by Junko. Blue Flag Volume 7 and Volume 8 by Kaito. Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Kah. The Last Fallen Star by Gracie Kim. Folklords by Matt Kint. The Decagon House Murders Volume 1 by Hiro Kiyohara. Given Volume 1 and Volume 2 by Natsuki Kizu. Quality Land by Mark Uwe Kling. Wolf Song by TJ Klune. Can't Stop Cursing You Volume 1 by Kensuke Koba. A Deal with the Elf King. And A Trial of Sorcerers by Elise Kova. City of Villains by Estelle Lohr. The Soulmate Equation and The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee. Persephone Station by Stina Light. The Cleaners by Ken Liu. Monstrous Volume 1 Awakening by Marjorie M. Liu. A Court of Honey and Ash by Shannon Mayer and Kelly St. Clair. The Cardigans by Cole McCade. The Last Witch, Fear and Fire by Connor McCreary. Spectre Inspectors by Bowen McCurdy. American Royals by Catherine McGee. Down Among the Sticks and Bones. And Dusk or Dark or Dawn or Day by Shauna McGuire. Keeper of the Lost Cities Exile. And Everblaze by Shannon Messenger. Carnival Omnibus Volume 1 by Toya Mikanagi. Anyway, I'm Falling in Love with You Volume 1 by Haruka Mitsui. Mouthful of Ashes. And A Trick-or-Treater Christmas by Brianna Morgan. Slay by Brittany Morris. One of the Good Ones by Maika and Maritza Mulit. Pilu of the Woods by Mai K. Wen. Love and Focus Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, and Those Not So Sweet Boys Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3 by Yoko Nogiri. A Study in Honor by Claire Odell. Death Note Black Edition Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, and Volume 4 by Sugumi Oba. Binti, and Hello Moto by Nettie Okorafor. To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. Set to Music by Najin Papen. The Lights on Knockbridge Lane by Roan Parrish. Song of Blood and Stone by El Penelope. Nine of Swords by Brooklyn Quintana. Teenage Grave edited by Ira Rat. Sabbath of the Fox Devils by Sam Richard. Desperate Measures by Katie Robert. The Complete Del Toro Shadowlands by Emily Rhoda. Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers. Altered by Jennifer Rush. Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan. Down Comes the Night by Allison Saft. Lock Every Door. And Survive the Night by Riley Sager. Ao Haru Ride Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, Volume 4, Volume 5, Volume 6, Volume 7, Volume 8, and Volume 9 by Io Sakisaka. The Rhythmatist by Brandon Sanderson. Doing His Best to Confess Volume 1 by Satoru. City of Ghosts and Tunnel of Bones by Victoria Schwab. Death Vigil Volume 1 by Stay Up on Sage. The Castle School for Troubled Girls by Alyssa B. Scheinmel. The Promised Neverland Volume 3, Volume 4, Volume 5, Volume 6, Volume 7, Volume 8, Volume 9, Volume 10, Volume 11, Volume 12, Volume 13, Volume 14, Volume 15, Volume 16, Volume 17, Volume 18, Volume 19, and Volume 20 by Kayu Shirai. Don't Die Dragonfly by Linda Joy Singleton. Secret Vampire and Daughters of Darkness by L.J. Smith. Big Bad Wolf by Sulika Snyder. The Scare School. The Horror at Happy Landings. Welcome to Beast Island. and Monstrosity by R.L. Stine. Hazel and Grey by Nick Stone. The Project by Courtney Summers. What Big Teeth by Rose Sabo. Star Daughter by Shweta Thakrar. The Donut Trap by Julie Pugh. Nevermore by Jessica Townsend. Something is Killing the Children, Volume 2 by James Tinian IV. What's Up Beanie by Alina Taiso. Prime Deceptions by Valerie Valdez. Saga Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, Volume 4, Volume 5, and Volume 6 by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. Hungry Daughters of Starving Mothers by Alyssa Wong. Sweat and Soap Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, and Volume 4 by Kintetsu Yamada. Taproot by Kizzy Young. Blood Air by Amelie Wen Zhao. The Dragon Warrior by Katie Zhao. And finally, Iron Widow by Shiran J. Zhao. And that is it, all 250 books that I read in the year of 2021. I will be having my best books and worst books, those kind of videos, coming out in the next week or so. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up to let me know. Subscribe to this channel if you would like to see more videos. I have videos coming out Tuesdays and Thursdays, so I will see you then. Bye!